Good evening, everyone. My name is Staphanie Love-Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director at Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. Welcome to Hotline 21, where tonight we'll be talking about domestic violence. So last week, well, first of all, I just want to remind everyone that this is a call-in show. You'll see the number at the bottom of the screen, so please feel free to call in with questions or comments as we go through the show. What I really want to talk about today as it relates to domestic violence is the issue of leaving. Last week we had a horrific murder in Chicago that really shook up Chicago, and I dare say other parts of the world, as it was broadcast over local and national TV. And that's where a gunman tragically senselessly shot down a doctor, a pharmaceutical attendant, and also a police officer at Mercy Hospital. This was done by Dr. Tamara O'Neal's ex-fiance. As this happened, as I mentioned, it shook the world. A lot of people were having a lot of questions. Why did this happen? How did this happen? And just all sorts of questions. It triggered a lot of individuals. A lot of victims and survivors of domestic violence reached out to us and called to say, you know, this affected me in this particular way, or this scared me, this triggered me. It took me all the way back to experiences that I had in the past as a victim of domestic violence. Well, one of the questions that was asked that resurfaced, and it tends to do this over and over again, is why doesn't she just leave? Why would she stay in an abusive relationship? And in this particular case, just in a general sense, not in particular this doctor, but all of those questions kind of go flying around. What we know in the domestic violence community are two things as it relates to those questions. The first is leaving doesn't always equal safety. Oftentimes people think, well, automatically, if you're in an abusive relationship, you should get out. You should no longer be in that relationship. Well, unfortunately, on last week, we saw in real time the real dangers of leaving or ending an abusive relationship. People often ask questions about how, why. Why did this happen? How could this happen? Does this person have mental health issues? Is he crazy? All kinds of questions like that. I don't know this person's, the shooter's specific situation or his condition, but what I do know is that power and control, which is the root of domestic violence, is intense. And many perpetrators of domestic violence will go to great lengths to establish and maintain that power and control. That is the core definition of domestic violence. It's about establishing and maintaining power and control over an intimate partner or family member through the use of fear or intimidation. It's not about what she said, not about what she did, not about how he acted when he came home. It's none of those things. It really is about establishing and maintaining that power and control. What we know at CAWC, as I mentioned earlier, and what we know just in the whole domestic violence community, that leaving does not always equal safety. And what do I mean by that? Well, simply that perpetrators of domestic violence have such an intensity when maintaining that power and control in a relationship. Their sort of train of thought is that you don't leave until I say you leave. Who are you? How dare you make a decision about this relationship? You leave when I say you leave, and not a moment sooner. Well, in this particular case, we learned, or it was reported, that Dr. O'Neal had called off her wedding from the person that shot her. I won't say his name. That she called off the wedding. Well, she took her power back. We feel in the domestic violence community, when you leave, when you end a relationship, when you get an order of protection and other sort of steps in that direction, it's reclaiming your power. And that's the last thing perpetrators of domestic violence want to have happen. And so they will sometimes tell you, you know, if you leave, I'll find you. If you leave, I'll kill you. I'll make you come back. I will do everything in my power to make your life a living hell, all the way up to the extremeness of what we saw in that parking lot and in the hospital at Mercy Hospital. I also want to say that before I go further, we really want to say from CAWC that we send our thoughts and our prayers to the families of each of those victims in that tragic situation. We know that there's such a connection between domestic violence and gun violence, as we saw again on that day. I'm going to go really quickly to our website, Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, or CAWC for short. Before I go further with talking about the issue of leaving, I want to tell you a little bit about our organization. So CAWC is the first domestic violence agency in the city of Chicago. We started Chicago's first 24-hour domestic violence hotline and 24-hour domestic violence shelter. We also have services at Haymarket Substance Abuse Treatment Center, at Stroger Hospital, and Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and in the Humboldt Park community. I encourage you, for those that are viewing us today, if you are a victim, if you know someone who is a victim, please go to our website. We recommend that you go to a safe place to use it, because perpetrators will sometimes use technology to find out what their partners are doing. But go to our website and check out some of our services. You'll also find there our 24-hour domestic violence hotline, which is area code 773-278-4566. Let me repeat that again. Our 24-hour domestic violence hotline number is area code 773-278-4566. You can call that number for yourself if you're in extreme danger. Some victims of domestic violence have told us they have a sense of when their abuser is going to try to kill them. From what I understand and what was reported in the news, Dr. O'Neal even told a bystander, "Please don't leave me." She implored him to stay with her because she felt like he was going to kill her. If you feel that situation, you feel like you're in extreme danger, call 911 if you can. And then call our 24-hour domestic violence hotline. What happens when you call that hotline? Well, it's connected to a trained counselor advocate who will first provide just validation for your experiences. The counselor also will believe you and will listen to you. For some victims, we've heard from our staff that they are the first person that actually believed what was going on because of some of the extreme nature of domestic violence and the situations that happened. I also encourage those that are watching right now, if you're not the person that is the target of the abuser, but if you see someone that's in a dangerous situation, we don't want you to get involved and put yourself in danger, but pick up that phone and call 911. And when people hesitate, I kind of tell them, take a minute or second really, and think about what would you want to have someone do if it were you. If it were your sister, if it were your brother, if it were your mother or a family member or a colleague or worshiper at your faith institution, what would you want to have done? You'd want someone to call and to help you out. So please call 911. But to also get the, information about our services, you as well can call our 24-hour hotline number at 773-278-4566 to get information on how to help support someone that you love or care or concerned about, or just a colleague at work who may be experiencing domestic violence. I'd also like to just remind everybody that's watching that this is a call-in show. We're talking about domestic violence. We're talking about the issue of leaving an abusive relationship. You see the number there at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to give us a call with any questions or comments that you have. So I talked a little bit about the dangers of leaving. One of the things that people will ask them when you talk about that is, so what do we do? How do I get out? What am I supposed to do? You tell me that leaving is one of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship. Well, if you call one of our trained counselor advocates, they can talk to you about safety planning. Safety planning is a huge part of what we do, in addition, to counseling and advocacy. So we talk about things like varying routes. So if there's someone out there today that may be watching who is trying to figure out how to get out of the relationship safely, and that's the key word, safely. Here's a couple of tips. Varying your routes from where you work or where you go to school or where you go to the grocery store, or even changing where you go to the grocery store and shop and things like that. We talk about orders of protection. One thing that I will caution people, and a lot of times victims will also tell us that, is that orders of protection can be super helpful for individuals. It means that a judge is telling the person who wants to hurt you that they have to be a certain distance away from you. They can't call you. They can't write you, Facebook message you, tweet, Instagram, any of those things that are tools of communication. You can't be within a certain distance. You can't be in the same place. Things like that. If there's any contact, they can go to jail. And for some individuals, that works. Other individuals will tell us that's really just a piece of paper, and sometimes even the abuser will say that's just a piece of paper, and it's only going to make them more angry, and so it's not going to work. One thing that you'll find out at Connections for Abused Women and Their Children is that we're options-based. So if you tell us, as we're giving you all of these different options and possibilities in terms of safety planning, that you don't think those will work, we will keep going, we'll keep talking, we'll keep working with you, we'll keep listening to you until you find something that you think will be helpful in your situation. And I see we have a caller. Hello?
Good evening, Stephanie.
Yes.
Hi, how are you this evening, dear?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm okay. I want to make a few comments about abuse and domestic violence. Sometimes domestic violence, it seems to be within the last 20 years when men are getting married to women, they're starting to think of us as their property. And sometimes after maybe 4 or 5 years it doesn't work out and they start hitting you and stuff, and you want to leave them, or you have a family member or a place like you people to go to, they're still going to try to find you. They don't want you to be with anybody else but them. For domestic violence, it is a cowardly thing from a man. I don't know what makes a man snap and hit a woman or a child. You very rarely hear a woman hitting a man. Like you're talking about this poor story last week with the hospital. There was no way for that woman to get away from him. She was a professional medical doctor, so he knew exactly where she was at. That feels so bad for all three of them, but there's nothing you could do about it. When you
thank you for calling. I'm not sure what happened with the call, but thank you so much for calling. A couple of things I want to respond to in your comments. One is that you're right. The greatest percentage of victims of domestic violence are female at the hands of male perpetrators, but there are female perpetrators of domestic violence, and there are male victims of domestic violence, and so that's something that we often have to clear up through education and training when we're speaking to different groups. You're right. There's an intensity, as I mentioned earlier, in which abusers will go to great lengths to try to find find their victim. And so, as I was talking about safety planning, that's one of the key things that we do. For some individuals, it could be a thing of getting an order of protection, and that works, as I was starting to say earlier. For some perpetrators of domestic violence, they don't care about getting an order of protection, and that doesn't work. And so another option for them is going into a domestic violence shelter, where there's safety and where we have individuals to provide counseling and advocacy and support. And, if we got paid for the amount of times that we talked about confidentiality and privacy and safety, we would all be rich. And sometimes that's an option for individuals. Some victims of domestic violence that we work with, we help to relocate them to another city or another state or perhaps back to their country. So I don't want people to think that because leaving doesn't equal safety, that victims are stuck and there's no way out. We have incredible stories that I could spend hours talking to you about in terms of individuals who have been in extreme danger, where perpetrators have said, if I find you, I'll kill you. They come to our organization, to CAWC, and we're able to work out some sort of viable option that works for them. Another part of the safety planning, might be to not use your phone. Because as we talked about, and I think the caller mentioned, sometimes it's hard to find a safe place for victims to go. Sometimes perpetrators track victims down by their cell phone. If you get a cell phone bill, you can kind of see and track where they are. We encourage them not to use credit cards because, again, if there's a joint account, perpetrators can kind of look on that card and see, oh, she got gas on 123 Main Street. She must be around there, and things like that. One of the nice things about Connections for Abused Women and Their Children is we're able to provide free cell phones to victims of domestic violence. That's a program that we're really proud of, to be able to give them a phone that's completely disconnected, literally and figuratively, from any device that the perpetrator may have purchased to keep track of them. I'm going to go back to our website really quickly and encourage people to go to our website to look up our services. And I'm really sorry, I'm fighting a cold here, so you may hear me sniffling a little bit in the background, but I encourage everyone to go to our website to check out our various services and our 24-hour hotline number, which is area code 773-278-4566. Again, 773-278-4566. And I, again, would like to encourage people to call in tonight. You see the number at the bottom of your screen if you have any comments or questions. As I said at the top of the show, we realize that a lot of people are triggered by the incident that happened last week. A lot of people are also just vigilant and concerned and want to know more about domestic violence and how can they keep themselves safe, or also how can you keep a friend or family member safe. And I'm going to start back with that little piece right there. So we've gotten phone calls from individuals who say, I'm so afraid for my sister or for my mom or for my coworker. They don't want to listen to me. What do? I don't want them to end up like Dr. O'Neal. Please pardon me. And so one of the things that we talk about first is to become better educated about domestic violence. Know the signs, the red flags, the warning signals, if you will, for domestic violence. And in part, you can do that by going to our website, cawc.org, but also getting as much information about domestic violence resources as you possibly can. Sometimes it's easier to help someone if you've got some information. Telling someone just to get out, you've got to leave, isn't necessarily the answer because, again, remember, leaving doesn't always equal safety. Also, it's not that easy. A lot of people think if you're a victim of domestic violence and you kind of have friends that are like, girl, if I were in that situation, I wouldn't stay there. I would get my bags and I would get my kids and I would get out. It's really not that easy. The links that perpetrators use to, again, establish and maintain that power and control are great, and they can be very manipulative, very calculating, very skillful in how that's that's played out in the relationship. So one of the things that we talk about at CAWC is how to get out, but how to get out safely. We've had safety plans that we've helped to create in a day, and safety plans within a week or a month. And for some people, it's taken years for them to find that small window of opportunity where they feel like it's a safe time for me to be able to leave with myself and with my family. So if you're trying to help someone in a relationship, get the information and maybe just have a conversation with them, and really a conversation. One of the last things that victims of domestic violence want to hear is the you should. You should do this. You should do that. You should get out. You should go. And again, that magical question, why would you stay? Oh, you must like it. You can't imagine some of the things that victims of domestic violence hear. And the last thing they need is for you that's trying to help them to also tell them what to do, or to make them feel any more shame or guilt that they're already experiencing as victims of domestic violence. Instead, provide that information and say, you could say even, I saw the show on Hotline 21 today, and it's about Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. And they have services and they have counseling that could help you leave the situation if that's what you want to do, and leave it safely. And we all have to understand that some people aren't always ready to leave when we think they should leave. And that's an important note to have. Excuse me. That just because we are in a state of alarm and think that they should leave, it doesn't mean that they're ready. Doesn't mean that they like it. Doesn't mean that they want to stay in there and continue to be abused by their partner or family member or ex-partner. A lot of times victims are scared. They're scared of retaliation. I can only imagine that individuals who witnessed what happened last week are terrified about leaving. What will the consequences be for me if I take that bold step and leave? So you have to understand that victims need to be given that time and that space to leave when they're ready. The one thing that you want to do when you're talking to someone who's a victim or you suspect is a victim of domestic violence is you want to make sure that you keep the door open so that they will continue to hear from you or to check in with you when they say that they need help. Some of the other things going back to leaving and safety planning is we talk about a series of things like getting a bag together for victims of domestic violence and packing a few things, like if you could squirrel away a little bit of money, if you can pack some, a couple of clothing items for yourself and for your children, some snacks for your kids, snacks for yourself, important telephone numbers like CAWC's number, 24-hour hotline number 773-278-4566, as well as other important numbers. If you can get copies of your order of protection, copies of driver's licenses or visas, passports, all kinds of important information, and maybe just make copies of it and put it in that bag and then leave that bag in a place that's safe where the perpetrator has no access to it. Because as I mentioned earlier, some victims have told us that they kind of have a sense, they've got that feeling that this may be the day that he's going to try to kill me. Or the perpetrators will actually say to them, this is what I'm going to do. Or you know what's going to happen when I get home. I'm really angry with you because you did A, B, or C. If you have that bag packed, if you have it stored in a place where the perpetrator doesn't have access to it, you have an opportunity to run out of the house and not have to wonder about, oh my gosh, where are my keys? Where's my driver's license? Where's some snacks for the kids or some clothes and things like that? You literally can leave your home and then go to wherever you have that bag stored so that you can just leave out of there, be safe, and then go to wherever you need to go, possibly with a police escort to retrieve your bag and start calling telephone numbers so that you can, whether it's to go to a family member or friend's home, or whether it's to go to an emergency domestic violence shelter like Connections for Abused Women and Their Children. That's a huge part of the safety planning that we talk about within the organization. And Because believe me, perpetrators of domestic violence, one of the first things they'll do if you leave any of those items that I talked about, important documentation, some of the other things are like, the deed to your house or, your car information, is they will take that information, and especially your ID, and they will rip it up and destroy it, or they'll hide it or kind of hold it hostage to make you come back. And I don't know if anybody out there that's watching me now has ever tried to function without having proper identification or not, if it were just stolen or misplaced, but it's really difficult, and perpetrators of domestic violence are counting on that. So it's so important to have that information in your bag. Get to someplace safe. Call 911 if necessary. Ask someone else to call 911. And then if you call a place like Connections for Abused Women and Their Children, one of the things that we do there is we'll hopefully, we'll talk to you and hopefully have space available in our shelter to be able to provide you with safe shelter for up to 120 days is the amount of time that we have shelter. As I come to a close, excuse me, I'm going to quickly go back to our website just so you can see what it looks like. CAWC, we encourage you to visit there to get information. We encourage you to do it safely. As I mentioned earlier, some perpetrators are very tech savvy, and they will look in your browser or look at your history to be able to see that you are searching for domestic violence services. So it'd be good to go to a library or to a family member, friend, where it's safe to go and look up that information to be able to call to access help for yourself. And please give us a call at our hotline number. Our main number is 773-489-9081. If you just want to call our organization to get additional information for yourself or for a family member. Again, it's 773-489-9081. And there are staff there that are ready to give you whatever type of information that you need, again, in order to keep yourself safe, in order to help someone else to be safe, and to live a life free from violence. I want to thank you so much for listening in, and thank you for the one caller. And again, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to the individuals, each of the individuals who were killed last week at Mercy Hospital. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the day.